Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is U.S. immigration attorney Hardam Tripathi from Trip Law. We're a U.S. immigration firm based out of Lakeland, Florida, and today we're going to be discussing tips and tricks, things to avoid during your visa interview or your green card interview or your naturalization or citizenship interview. So there's actually really some great things to know when you're coming to your interview. You always want to make sure that when you go to the interview, you're not guessing. When the immigration officer asks you a couple questions, you want to make sure you're not guessing in terms of your answers. You want to make sure you're very confident. You want to make sure you're aware and prepared for those questions, because if you do guess, that can ultimately create a sense of discrepancy with respect to the officer asking you the questions and your physical trust when answering those questions. So you don't want to guess on your questions. You definitely want to be prepared and definitely be ready to answer any question that could be forthcoming. Then another strategy, another thing to avoid when you're at the interview is not to mumble. You don't want to mumble, you don't want to ramble. You want to actually keep your answers very concise, and you want to make sure that less is more. The reason why we say that is because if you answer questions that are not asked of you, it may give the immigration officer extra arsenal in terms of a decision making that could be adverse to what you were looking for. So ultimately you want to make sure that anytime you answer, you do not mumble, you're very concise, you're clear, and you're making sure that you are basically answering what is being asked of you. Finally, you also want to know that don't answer what's more than necessary. A lot of the times we get clients who will answer questions that aren't actually related to what's being asked of them, or they're rambling on about a certain situation or a fact. But remember, the less you provide in a concise way is actually going to benefit you as the applicant applying for that immigration benefit. Now, another thing you want to avoid, especially during these difficult times, COVID-19 is a big pandemic currently going on at the time of this video, and because of that, USCIS has adjusted a lot of their processes as it relates to actually going to the interview and abiding by these COVID-19 guidelines. So a lot of the times when you actually show up, they're going to have seats where you sit down prior to actually entering the interview, and they're going to have seats where you have to sit one seat apart, or you may want to make sure that you are actually either vaccinated, and if you're not vaccinated, that you're arriving there, making sure you're not sick, and that when they read your temperature, you're not actually in a position where you may not be able to have the interview. So you just want to make sure that, when you go to the interview, don't shake the officer's hand, keep your 6 feet distance, and also make sure you use the hand sanitizer box when you're about to go into the interview, because they will ask you for that. Another thing is you want to bring all your documents. Documents are very important. You want to make sure if this is an interview where you are ultimately trying to get your green card, that you're bringing your I-485 application, that you're bringing your I-130 application, that you're bringing your I-864 application, or if you have an attorney, making sure the attorney is bringing their G28 application. These forms are all very important, and you should use these forms to study for the actual interview so that there's no issues when you're at the interview itself. Having these forms, having the original copies of your passport, of your green card, or of your visa, or your birth certificate or marriage certificates, all these documents are very important, and you definitely want to make sure that you bring these documents, you have them organized in a way that if the officer asks you, you can easily pull up that application for your benefit when answering these questions. Now, if there are any updates to your application, for example, you had another child or things change within your tax situation, you want to bring the most recent tax paperwork, or you want to bring more recent pictures of you and your significant other. These are all different things that will be updated at the time of the interview that you want to bring, so you have a clear snapshot of the actual current time period of when you're actually applying for that application. So making sure you're bringing the right applications is something that's very important, and you don't want to avoid that. You don't want to not have your applications with you and your paperwork and your documents. So very, very important. Another thing you want to make sure to avoid is don't lie. Don't lie to the immigration officer. Obviously, this is something that is very important, but if the immigration officer asks you a question, you cannot lie to them, because this can have severe consequences down the road when you're applying for these immigration benefits. So for example, if you're applying for your green card application, if you lie on that green card application, not only do you jeopardize that application, but you also jeopardize getting your citizenship down the road. And remember that this is a privilege that is being afforded to you by the United States government and by USCIS, so you don't want to jeopardize your chances of getting that immigration benefit by lying to the officers. So lying is something you definitely want to avoid when going to these immigration interviews. Another thing is you don't want to be rude to the immigration officer. This is kind of common sense. However, sometimes you may be, feeling nervous, or you may not be trying to be rude, but you may accidentally come off as rude. So you want to, practice humility. You definitely want to be respectful. Yeah, if you can't hear the officer, you might want to just say "pardon me" rather than just say "what." So there are certain things you want to do to stay grounded, stay humble, stay not arrogant, and ultimately avoid being rude to your immigration officer, because the easier you make it for the immigration officer, the easier you make it for you. So ultimately, being rude can have adverse effects on your application, so it's very important that that does not happen at your interview. You also want to be prepared. You also want to make sure that when you're coming into this interview, you treat it like it's a job interview, or you treat it like it's a very serious moment in your life. Obviously, someone who's going through all this process, you spent a lot of time, you spent a lot of money. You definitely want to be prepared. You want to arrive on time. You want to be there 30 minutes prior to, just in case things happen that are outside of your control. If you're prepared and you arrive on time, you're prompt, polite, and prepared, it will only be advantageous to you as the applicant. And ultimately, you can do your research ahead of time for your interview. Google is a great source. Immigration attorney is a great source. You can reach out to our law firm. We'd be more than happy to help prepare you and attend the interview with you. But ultimately, you can do a lot of due diligence and a lot of research ahead of time. And if you do that, you'll save a lot of headaches on the back end. So ultimately, today we discussed kind of the pitfalls to avoid, the things that you want to avoid when going to an immigration interview, may it be a visa interview at the State Department, or whether it be a USCIS green card interview or a citizenship interview. You just want to make sure you're polite, you're prepared, you're not lying, that you're arriving on time, that you're following COVID protocols, and ultimately just being prepared overall, just so you can have that successful interview. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is U.S. Immigration Attorney Hardam Tripathi from Trip Law. We wish you the best of luck with your interview ahead, and just want to say good luck and avoid these pitfalls so you can have a successful path forward. Thank you and have a great day.